You know, when you sit in the audience and, like, watch a magic trick, there's this unspoken agreement,
I mean,
right?
for sure. You want to be fooled.
Exactly. You watch the magician saw someone in half, and you willingly surrender to the illusion. You actively want to be tricked. But imagine, just for a second, stepping backstage.
Right, seeing all the wires.
Yeah. Suddenly you see the trapdoors, you see the hidden mirrors, the sleight of hand. And, I mean, the illusion totally loses its magic, but you gain this incredibly deep appreciation for the sheer architecture of the trick.
Which is really its own kind of magic, honestly.
It really is. And that is exactly what we're doing today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We're going backstage to look at the trapdoors of modern political deception, guided by StevePotter's 2026 debut book, Would I Lie to You?
It's a fascinating read.
So our mission for this deep dive is to extract the mechanics of how grand political pronouncements and what the author calls truth gaps work. Specifically, we're looking at the playbook utilized by Donald Trump and how these narratives are engineered to basically bypass logic and appeal directly to emotion.
Yeah, and before we get into the gears of that machine, it is so vital to establish something right up front. Our goal for you today isn't to take political sides, or endorse a specific ideology.
Right, we're just looking at the mechanics.
Exactly. We are neutrally analyzing the author's arguments. We're looking at the psychological and the structural framework of narrative engineering. We want to understand the blueprints of how stories are built to persuade completely, regardless of the politics behind them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Potter argues that to understand modern political reality distortion, you can't actually start in Washington.
No, not at all.
You have to look at where this playbook was invented,
Yeah.
which takes us back to the cutthroat world of 1980s Manhattan real estate.
Because that is where the foundational myth is built, right? Potter spends a lot of time in the book deconstructing the architecture of the self-made narrative.
Right, the whole origin story.
Yeah. If you follow politics or business, you've likely heard the famous claim of starting an empire with a small loan of $1 million.
I think everyone has heard that line by now.
Right. But the author lays out the financial records to show that this $1 million loan was actually just the, highly visible tip of a massive iceberg.
A very specific, very curated tip.
Exactly. Adjusted for inflation, Potter shows it was actually a $413 million family wealth transfer. And it wasn't just a single check either.
Wow, 413 million.
Yeah, Potter documents how this was orchestrated through decades of intricate tax strategies and, various shell companies.
Which is fascinating because it means the very first illusion wasn't political at all, it was mathematical.
Right.
And it wasn't just the money that was engineered, right? It was the physical buildings themselves.
Oh, right down to the elevator buttons. It's wild.
Well,
Potter highlights the architectural fiction of Trump Tower. So the building itself is 58 stories tall.
okay.
But it was aggressively marketed as a 68-story skyscraper. And they didn't build an extra 10 floors or anything.
Wait, so what did they do?
They simply skipped elevator buttons. They renumbered the commercial floors so that the residential elevator magically just started at floor 20.
That is, it's so audacious. But
Yeah.
wait, how does someone get away with just declaring a building is taller than it physically is?
You'd think someone would check, right?
Yeah, don't city planners or journalists point out that you can just stand on the sidewalk and count the windows?
Well, that's where Potter introduces a psychological mechanism he calls financial gaslighting.
Financial gaslighting. Okay.
Yeah. It's not just lying about a number. It's the strategic art of reframing standard real estate development, or in this case, generational wealth, as this unprecedented self-made genius.
Oh, I see.
And it worked because these early tactics exploited a very specific vulnerability in the media attribution norms of the 1980s.
Ah, yes. The John Barron era.
The famous John Barron.
Yeah, for those listening who haven't read the book yet, Potter details how Trump would literally act as his own PR spokesperson.
Under a fake name.
Right. He would call reporters under the fake name John Barron to plant these glowing stories about his own wealth, his business acumen, even his romantic conquests.
It sounds totally absurd now, but it reveals a massive structural flaw in the press at the time.
But I have to push back a little here because my natural reaction is to just laugh. John Barron basically sounds like the billionaire equivalent of two kids in a trench coat trying to buy a movie ticket.
Yeah, it really does.
How did any seasoned New York reporter actually fall for this if it was so incredibly transparent?
Well, actually, it's deeper than them just falling for it, Potter explains that the media ecosystem at the time rewarded quotability over verification.
Okay, so it was about getting the story out fast.
Exactly. Journalists needed colorful quotes to meet their daily deadlines. By providing those quotes, even under a thinly veiled pseudonym, he was effectively laundering his own praise through what appeared to be a third party in print.
Oh, wow. So he gave them what they needed.
Right. The mechanism here is brilliant in its cynicism, really. The press needed content, he provided the content, and once it was printed in a major newspaper, the illusion became the archived reality.
Because it's on paper.
Exactly. Future reporters would check the archives, see the printed claims, and just repeat them as fact.
Okay, so if building that towering myth was step one, I'm really curious how this architecture holds up when things actually go wrong.
Because eventually, reality bites back.
Right, because you can fake elevator buttons to sell an apartment, but you can't really fake cash when the bank comes knocking for their mortgage payment.
And that takes us to what Potter calls the Atlantic City Laboratory. The author argues this is where the playbook for reframing massive systemic failure was perfected.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Let's look at the Trump Taj Mahal Casino. In the marketing materials, it was dubbed the eighth wonder of the world.
Very modest.
Naturally. But Potter lays out the underlying math, and it's staggering. The project was financed with 14% junk bonds.
Wait, 14%? That's like credit card interest rates on a multi-million-dollar construction project.
Exactly. Because of that incredible debt load, the casino was bleeding cash before the doors even opened. Potter notes that the Taj Mahal required $1.3 million every single day just to service its debt.
Just the debt.
Not to make a profit, just to pay the daily interest.
I want you to consider that math for a second. If a business model requires absolute mathematical perfection every single day of the year just to break even on its loans, is that a business plan or is that just a really expensive prayer?
It's definitely leaning toward a prayer.
And beyond that, how does a casino, a business mathematically designed by the laws of probability to take people's money, actually go bankrupt?
What's fascinating here is that when it inevitably did go bankrupt, the author points out that it wasn't presented to the public as a mathematical failure at all.
How is it presented?
Well, Potter analyzes the academic concept of reframing. Reframing is when you shift the public's focus away from the objective reality of a situation and substitute a completely different emotional narrative.
Okay, so a distraction.
Yeah, but an emotional one. For example, when the Atlantic City Empire was facing desperate insolvency, there was an incident the book dubs the illegal chip bailout.
Oh, this is a crazy story.
It really is. Fred Trump, the father, sent a lawyer to the casino to buy $3.35 million in chips, and the lawyer never placed a single bet.
Not one hand of blackjack.
Nope. He just handed over the money to inject emergency cash so the casino could meet a debt payment.
Which, just to be clear for anyone listening, is a massive violation of gaming regulation.
Absolutely illegal. But Potter points out that when the regulatory fines eventually hit, and this was exposed, the narrative was masterfully reframed.
How did they spin it?
It wasn't framed as a humiliating rescue of an insolvent business. It was pitched to the public as a story of deep family loyalty. A father helping a son, a heroic survival against impossible regulatory odds.
Wow.
The core failure is completely masked by an emotionally resonant story.
But the cost of that reframing was heavy for the people buying into the illusion, wasn't it?
Very heavy.
The book documents how these prepackaged bankruptcies ultimately devastated retail investors, like regular people who bought the stock and lost an estimated $1.5 billion by 2004.
Yeah, the human cost was huge.
Meanwhile, the branding and the consulting fees were retained by the executives. It's like the failure was successfully outsourced to the public, but the myth of success was safely kept in-house.
And that transition is crucial for understanding the rest of the book. The author argues that moving from the business world to the political arena required a totally new tool.
Yeah.
The old tactics of financial reframing were merged with a new strategy, which Potter calls the industrial manufacturing of doubt.
Now, I know what you're thinking at home. You're thinking, okay, but politicians have been stretching the truth, spinning the numbers and manufacturing doubt since the dawn of democracy. So what makes this playbook actually unique?
It's a fair question. What makes it unique is the sheer scale and the complete detachment from verifiable reality.
Okay.
Potter points to the 2011 birtherism campaign as the political IPO of this strategy.
Ah, yes.
We all remember the claims about private investigators being sent to Hawaii, right? They were supposedly finding unbelievable things about Barack Obama's birth certificate.
Right. things that, of course, never materialized.
Precisely. Potter highlights that the strategic objective wasn't to actually produce a report. The goal was to manufacture the feeling of an investigation.
Oh, so just the vibe of a scandal.
Exactly. By publicly announcing detectives, you create the illusion of a legitimate inquiry without the cost, the risk, or the burden of actual research. It fills the news cycle with the premise of a scandal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's almost like a retail loss leader. The idea wasn't to prove the claim. The idea was to create artificial scarcity and artificial demand for a legally unnecessary document.
A financial short squeeze, basically.
Yeah, a short squeeze.
Yeah.
The strategy was to profit off the media volatility, squeezing the news cycle until the long-form document was finally produced, and then instantly claiming victory for forcing its release.
Right.
The truth of the claim didn't matter at all. Controlling the media's attention was the real currency.
And Potter details the psychological mechanism behind why this works, citing a sociological concept known as conspiracy cascades.
Conspiracy cascades. What does that mean?
This is vital. When the human brain accepts that a fundamental institution is lying to them, like, say, the government hiding a president's true birthplace, it actively lowers the cognitive barrier to accepting the next conspiracy.
Oh, wow. So you're primed for it.
Exactly. You've breached the mental firewall. The next manufactured doubt doesn't have to break down the wall. It just walks right through the open door.
That is terrifying.
The author argues this permanently altered epistemic realities, priming people to later accept massive claims about, election fraud or climate denial.
But what happens when the narrative suddenly becomes a political liability? Because Potter notes that in 2016, the birtherism strategy abruptly shifted to the Hillary started it rebrand.
Right, and that is what the author calls narrative laundering.
Narrative laundering.
By claiming a political opponent actually originated the conspiracy, it provided believers with a face-saving exit. They could abandon the discredited theory without ever having to admit they were fooled.
So they don't feel stupid.
Exactly. They just reassign the blame elsewhere. It scrubs the slate clean without anyone ever having to offer an apology or admit a lapse in judgment.
Okay, so the problem with manufacturing doubt on the campaign trail is that eventually it might actually work. You might win.
Right, and then you're in charge.
And when you win, you suddenly have to deliver on the mirage. How does a campaign built on creating alternate realities transition into actually running the federal government?
That is the central question of the book's second half. Potter transitions from how you win an election to how this playbook operates as institutional governance.
Okay, take us there.
It opens on Inauguration Day 2017. The immediate dispute over the crowd size, despite crystal clear photographic evidence from the National Park Service, and the subsequent invention of the phrase alternative facts by Kellyanne Conway.
But the example that really stuck with me is what Potter calls the rain mirage.
Oh, yes. That one is incredible.
The claim made during the inaugural address that God stopped the rain while the president was speaking, despite meteorological data and visible video evidence showing that it was, in fact, raining on the podium.
Yeah, you could see the raindrops.
And I have to ask, why lie about something as verifiable as the weather? It's not a classified state secret. Everyone standing in that crowd can physically feel the water hitting their faces.
It seems baffling, right? Until you view it through the lens of narrative architecture. The author's analysis answers that exact question. Lying about the weather wasn't a PR mistake. It was a stress test.
A stress test.
Potter argues it established early on that loyalty to the narrative trumped objective reality. If you can make people doubt the rain falling on their own heads, you can make them doubt absolutely anything the administration does.
Wow. So it's about compliance, not truth.
Yes. And the ecosystem aggressively rewards this behavior. The book backs this up when citing MIT research showing that false political news travels 70% faster than truth on social media.
70%.
Yeah. The platforms are literally algorithms built to reward the speed and the emotional resonance of an illusion, completely outstripping the slow, boring trudge of fact-checking.
Which brings us to actual policy, because if objective reality is sidelined, Potter argues that legislation itself basically becomes a form of performance art.
Well, yeah. When the truth gap becomes your standard operating procedure, legislation doesn't actually need to be written, it just needs to be perpetually promised.
Right. And the ultimate example in the book is the 2 weeks healthcare plan. Potter tracks how comprehensive healthcare replacement was promised to arrive in 2 weeks.
Just 2 weeks away.
And that promise stretched for 1,461 days, a full 4 years, with zero actual legislative text ever produced. The promise was the policy.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the exact same mechanism with the Liberation Day tariffs.
Oh, let's talk about the tariffs.
The book points out the mathematically false but emotionally potent claim that China pays the tariffs. Economic consensus is incredibly clear on this. American consumers and businesses pay import taxes at the port.
Yeah, it is tax on domestic buyers.
Exactly.
Right, and when those tariffs sparked international retaliation that devastated American farmers, Potter notes the administration rolled out a $28 billion taxpayer-funded bailout.
Massive bailout.
But they explicitly didn't call it a bailout. They branded it a farmer bridge payment. It's an incredible deflection.
The branding is everything.
It's akin to a quarterback claiming individual credit for throwing, catching, scoring, selling tickets, and mowing the field all at once. But the game's always scheduled for 2 weeks from now. They are masking the cause of the crisis by aggressively branding the cure.
Potter explains this cognitive blind spot through the affect heuristic.
The affect heuristic.
Yeah, it's a psychological term for how the brain substitutes a really hard question with an easy one.
Okay, give me an example.
So the hard question is, does the math of this macroeconomic tariff policy actually benefit my bottom line? That takes spreadsheets and research and time.
Right, nobody wants to do that.
Exactly. The easy question is, how does the phrase America First or Farmer Bridge make me feel? Those phrases are designed to trigger emotional shortcuts that intentionally bypass rational economic scrutiny.
So you just go with your gut.
Yeah, if a policy feels patriotic to you, you are far less likely to do the math to see if it's costing you money.
So what does this all mean for us today? Because Potter brings the reader right into the 2026 ecosystem. And it's clear these techniques haven't faded. If anything, they've metastasized across the entire modern political landscape.
The author presents a unifying theory for modern hoaxes. They are no longer defensive spins, you know? They are offensive weapons used to demand loyalty and shape reality. Rather than listing every single controversy, Potter uses a few key examples to show how the guardrails of embarrassment have totally vanished. Like, you look at Vivek Ramaswamy's Hamas condom fabrication.
Oh, the US aid thing.
Yes. He deliberately misread a $1.8 million US aid contract for Mozambique and claimed it was going to Gaza.
Right. Or take the claim about the $2 trillion DOGE savings.
Another perfect example.
The narrative pushed is that $2 trillion in government waste can be painlessly cut. But Potter points out this is a mathematical mirage because it actually exceeds the entire discretionary budget of the United States.
The math literally doesn't work.
You mathematically cannot cut that much without slashing core mandatory services like Medicare or Social Security.
And then there's the SAVE Act, which targets non-citizen voting. Potter notes that documented cases of non-citizen voting occur at a frequency of roughly 0.000000007%.
That's practically zero.
It is. It's engineering a massive legislative solution to manufacture the public perception of a crisis that, statistically speaking, barely exists.
And that leads to the weaponization of the word hoax itself, right? The book analyzes the Epstein hoax midterm strategy.
Yeah, this is a fascinating shift in language.
The author concludes that calling something a hoax is no longer a claim of innocence. It's an offensive mechanism used to preemptively delegitimize real, documented investigations.
Exactly.
No.
If you loudly adopt the hoax narrative, you signal that you are part of the political in-group. It becomes a badge of identity rather than a statement of fact.
But there are real-world consequences to this, right? It's not just a fun game of rhetoric.
Absolutely not. The author compares these modern fiscal fictions like the $2 trillion cuts to Britain's 2010 austerity program.
Oh, that's a grim comparison.
Potter demonstrates the very real consequences of slashing budgets based on inflated imaginary estimates of government waste. When policies are built on mirages, real people lose actual services. Hospitals close, infrastructure crumbles, and the social safety net phrase, all because the math was never real to begin with.
Okay, let's bring this all together. Potter's book, Would I Lie to You, presents a really stark core lesson here. As a culture, we have shifted from a society that demands verification to one that prioritizes emotional satisfaction.
It's all about how the story makes us feel.
Right. And the realization here is that political deception thrives when we treat it like the weather, something that just happens to us, something we just have to endure, rather than an engineered system that we can actually audit, understand, and dismantle.
But importantly, the author doesn't leave you completely empty-handed.
Always good to have a takeaway.
Yeah, the book offers a reality check toolkit for navigating this new ecosystem. Potter encourages you to demand paper trails before arbitrary deadlines. Learn to cross-reference data outside of your preferred media bubble.
It's a big one.
And most importantly, Potter suggests imposing a strict 48-hour delay on yourself before sharing any claim or article that feels deeply emotionally satisfying to your pre-existing beliefs.
I love that rule.
If it makes you feel instantly righteous, it is highly likely it was engineered to bypass your critical thinking.
Steve Potter's book leaves us with a lingering question to ponder long after you take your headphones off today. If our political system now mathematically rewards the velocity of a confident fiction over the slow, boring trudge of a verifiable fact, well, are we, the audience, actually the ones demanding the illusion?
Yeah.
And if we are the ones constantly buying the tickets to the magic show, can we really blame the magician for hiding the rabbit?